What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you a preview and game prediction on the 2024 ACC Football Conference Championship game matchup between the Clemson Tigers and the SMU Mustangs. So I am going to give you a preview and prediction on all the Power 4 Conference Championship games that are coming up for you this weekend for Conference Championship weekend of the 2024 college football season. We're going to kick things off here with the ACC. Tomorrow I'll have the Big Ten, and then on Wednesday it will be the Big 12, and then on Thursday I will close things out with the SEC. So we're going to give you a preview of this game. We're going to go through stat comparisons here between these two teams, give you a preview of what time the game will be, and see who the favorite going into this game is. And then we'll also take a look at two of these teams' previous games that they've already played throughout the regular season. And then at the end of this video, that's where I'll make my official prediction on how I think the game is going to go down. So let's go ahead and get started here with our ACC Football Conference Championship game preview and prediction on this matchup. So let's go ahead and get started with the stat comparisons here between these two teams. So here are the stats for both of these teams. We're going to start with Clemson first. This team averaging points per game at 35.7 points per game. Total yards per game for Clemson, 465.7 yards per total yards this year. So yeah, this is a really explosive Clemson offense. I'll get to the ranking here in just a moment. Passing yards per game, 275.1 yards per passing. Rushing yards per game for Clemson, 190.6 yards of rushing on the ground. And then you look at the defensive side of the football. I only have these two things, passing yards and rushing yards allowed for the defensive side of the football for both of these teams. Passing yards allowed per game for Clemson, they're giving up just about 206.9 yards per passing. And then rushing yards allowed on the ground, they're giving up about 150.3 yards per rushing on the ground. And then you look at the rankings here for both sides of the football for Clemson. They are 8th in the country on offense, and then, of course, 57th on defense. So, yeah, this is a much better Clemson offense than it has been in the last few years. I mean, you look at where Clemson's been like, on the offensive side of the football. It was really up and down probably since like 2021. And ever since like the Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson days, those were like times where Clemson was very explosive on offense due to those, passing yard numbers between Lawrence and Watson. But, ever since those two guys left, it seemed like Clemson was a little bit up and down, but Cade Klubnik has gotten better as a quarterback for Clemson, and this offense just overall is really good on that offensive side of the football. They're really good at running the football, and they're also really good at passing the football. So Clemson here, 8th in the country on offense, and then defensively, you look at the ranking there, 57th on defense. It's not the most talented defense that Clemson's had in the recent years, back in like the Trevor Lawrence days as well, and then the Deshaun Watson days, but overall, this is still a very talented Clemson defense. I know they're 57th in the country, but that is still a really talented defensive team. Let's now move on to SMU stats. They're averaging just about 29 points per game. 408 yards per game of total yards this year. So this is also a pretty explosive offense, just like Clemson is. You look at the passing yards per game, 308 yards per passing. 100 yards of rushing on the ground. So this team doesn't really run the football that much, it seems like. It seems like they pass the football a little bit more. Passing yards allowed on the defensive side of the football, they're giving up just about 150 yards of passing. That's a really good number there. And then rushing yards allowed, it's also a pretty decent number, about average, about 148 yards of rushing on the ground allowed here for this SMU team. And then offensively and defensively in the rankings, it's pretty even for SMU, 21st on offense and then 28th on defense. So stat comparison-wise between these two teams, Clemson has an advantage on the total yards per game, but it's pretty close between these two teams. Passing yards per game, SMU has a big advantage there, 308 yards per passing. Rushing yards per game, Clemson with a big advantage there. Again, this is an SMU team that just doesn't really run the football that much. But you look at Clemson, this is a pretty balanced offense. So is SMU. But I think SMU is more of a passing team instead of like a running team, to be honest. And then you look at the passing yards allowed. SMU has a big advantage in both of those stats except for the rushing yards allowed. These two teams don't really allow a lot of rushing yards on the ground. So Yeah, both defenses seem like they're pretty even. And again, offensively in the rankings, Clemson has a better offense than SMU does. But defensively, SMU has an advantage in the ranking there. So that is the stat comparisons here between these two teams. Let's now get into the preview of this game here for this conference championship game. So again, it's going to be Clemson versus SMU in this ACC conference championship game. It'll take place on Saturday at 8 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. In Charlotte, North Carolina, of course, that's where this conference championship game is held at almost every single year. SMU, the spread's going to them by 2.5-point favorites, so Clemson is an underdog in this game. I think it's just because SMU has been playing better football, and I think the reason why that spread is in favor of SMU is because Clemson did lose to South Carolina just this past weekend, and the over-and-under is sitting at 54.5. So this game could probably go two different ways. It could be a shootout. It could be a low-scoring defensive battle. I think both defenses are pretty even. Offensively, they're both really good offensive teams. So I think both defenses have to bring their A game here in this one. And then you look at Clemson and SMU, the storylines in this game. For Clemson, if they win this conference championship game, they'll be in the college football playoff. So yeah, Clemson, this is definitely a must-win for them. They are the underdog here, so maybe they prove everyone wrong being the underdog. And then you look at SMU. Even if SMU wins or loses, they'll be in the college football playoff. But the different storyline there for the playoff, if SMU wins this game, they're going to get that first round bye. But if they don't win this game, they're going to have to play a first round game in the playoffs. So both of these teams have different storylines in this game. Again, Clemson, if they win this game, they're in the college football playoff. But if SMU wins and if they lose and everything, then they're actually going to be like in the first round game. They're actually going to be in a first round game if they lose, but if they win, they'll be they'll get that bye week in the first round. So that is the storylines going into this game, and then you take a look at the matchup predictor. The FPI does favor SMU in this game, not by a big percentage though. They give SMU about a 53.6% chance of winning this conference championship. And then for Clemson, the FPI does give them about a 46.4% chance, so the FPI pretty much even here between both of these teams. So that is what the FPI is saying here between these two teams. And again, this game will be at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Saturday on ABC. There are 3 games, going to be on ABC for conference championship weekend. You got the Big 12 and the SEC both on ABC, so this game will be a little bit later in the day. But yeah, SMU is favored by 2.5, and the over and under is sitting at 54.5. Let's now get into the two teams' previous game comparisons. And we will start here with Clemson. They come in with a record of 9-3, so they have 3 losses on the year. The other loss that we don't really have included here in these previous 5 games is Georgia. They lost that game in the season opener, but you look at their previous 5 games. They lost their first game here in the month of November against Louisville at home 33-21. Obviously, that was kind of a disappointing loss for Clemson. That was kind of a game that I kind of counted out Clemson. After losing to Louisville, I was kind of counting them out of the ACC championship picture. But after Miami lost and everything, that really helped Clemson out. So Louisville here, that was definitely a tough loss back on November 2nd. They did bounce back, though, against Virginia Tech on the road, a really tough environment to play at. They defeated Virginia Tech back on November 9, 24-14. Defeated Pittsburgh on the road November 16, 24-20. That was a really close game, and that was obviously like a really good finish to that game as well. And yeah, they had to play back-to-back road games there against Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh, and they won both of those back-to-back road games. Defeated the Saito and FCS team 51-14 back on November 23rd, and then just this past weekend they lost to rival South Carolina. That was not an ACC conference game, though. That was a non-conference game, so it wasn't really like a big deal for Clemson, but they ended up losing that game 17-14. I think Clemson fans are probably still really upset about that loss because it's obviously very tough to lose to your rival every single year, but yeah, Clemson did lose that game by 3 points, 17-14, back on November 30th, which just was like a couple days ago. And then SMU on the other side, they come in with a record of 11-1. Before I get into their previous 5 games, the only loss that they have this year is to BYU back on September 6th. And ever since that game, SMU's been on a big winning streak as of late. And they have won the rest of their games. We'll start here with this game against Duke on the road. They beat them back on October 26, 28-27 in overtime. That was probably the toughest game that SMU has played all year long in the ACC. Again, they don't really have a tough schedule. I mean, the Louisville game was pretty close as well, but Duke definitely gave SMU a pretty big scare there going into overtime in that game. And then they defeated Pittsburgh pretty easily back on November 2nd, 48-25. So both of these teams, if you compare them against Pittsburgh, SMU definitely had a much more better performance against Pittsburgh than Clemson did. But, SMU had that game at home, and then Clemson had to play on the road. They defeated Boston College back on November 16th in a pretty close call, 38-28. I know the score doesn't look like it's really close, but Boston College was right there with SMU in the fourth quarter. Then they defeated Virginia to kind of clinch that ACC championship spot, 33-7. So a big win there for SMU. And then last weekend they defeated California 38-6 back on November 30th. So that is the previous game comparisons here between both of these teams. And if you look at the game comparison, wise here, Louisville, of course, that was a tough loss for Clemson. I feel like Clemson has played a much tougher schedule than SMU this year, and SMU has played like an easier schedule, so that's probably the difference here between these two teams in their previous game comparisons. All right, let's now get to the prediction here for this conference championship game. Again, it's Clemson 9-3 taking on SMU, who is 11-1. Both of these teams will find out where they're ranked at in the playoff rankings coming out tomorrow night. But this should be a good one here, and like I said, according to the over and under, this game can actually go like two different ways. I mean, you look at the over and under, it's at 54.5. It could be a high-scoring shootout type ball game, or it could be a low-scoring type game. I think it's going to come down to a low-scoring defensive battle. I think both defenses are pretty even. I mean, offensively, I probably would give the advantage to SMU because of the total yards per game and everything, but I think it's going to be a pretty close game. Actually, Clemson has a total yard advantage. I forgot to mention that a little bit earlier. But yeah, Clemson here, I think they're the better team here. But, SMU is going to come out really focused. And again, the storylines here for both of these teams. Clemson has to win this game in order to make the college football playoff. Because if they win this game, they're automatically in. And then for SMU, even if they lose this game, they're still going to be in the playoff, but they're going to have to play a first-round game. And then if they win this game, they're definitely going to secure that, first-round bye and everything. I think it's a close game, but I think Clemson has, not a lot to lose here. I think Clemson comes out really focused, and I think they were kind of overlooking South Carolina just a little bit. They were probably focused on this game for the next weekend. And, after they saw Miami lose probably on TV, they were probably thinking, yeah, we can win this game. And I think they do win it here. I think I'm going to go with Clemson here. 24-21 is what I'm going to go with. So a 3-point win here for Clemson does get them into the college football playoff, but for SMU, I don't think they're really going to be penalized because if they lose to Clemson, they'll definitely drop here, but they'll still be in the playoff bracket, and that will be enough for SMU to get that first-round game. But yeah, I think Clemson wins it here. I think Clemson, their season's been up and down this year, and I think they definitely deserve a lot of credit. It seems like they've had their ups and downs, but, Clemson comes out fired up. They are the underdog in this game, and they do secure a spot in the college football playoff. So I am going with Clemson here. I do trust Dabo Swinney and K. Klubnik in like big games like this, so I got to go with Clemson here. 24-21 is what I'm going to go with here in my ACC championship prediction. So that is my official prediction for the 2024 ACC Conference Championship game. Let me guys know what you think about this ACC championship game. Who do you think wins it? Give me your final score predictions down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.